Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I support the statement that has been made by the Honorable Member of Parliament. I think,
Honorable Member, could you therefore assist me by mentioning your name and constituency?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My name is Emmanuel Marfo, Oforikrom Constituency, Kumasi. Mr. Speaker, for some time now, we've been discussing environmental degradation and deforestation in particular. And a lot of drivers have been identified. We have always said that bushfires, illegal logging, and so on have been the main factors driving deforestation. This statement has pointed out another important driver, and that is sand winning. And I think that the reference that was made to the Ministry of Environment, we might also want to ask them to cause to be studied or to have a more empirical study into the actual extent of sand winning and the environmental costs, so that we will be in a position to be able to make a firm or take a firm policy response to that. Mr. Speaker, it is important because we live in a country that has one of the highest rates of deforestation. As we speak today, 2% of our forest cover is lost every year, and it is said that between 5 to 10% of our GDP are lost or are the cost of the environmental cost is about 5 to 10% of GDP. And therefore, any subject matter that affects the environment is something that this House, I believe, must take or must pay attention to. My final comment on the statement will be to crave your indulgence, Mr. Speaker, to also make a reference of this matter to the Ministry of Lands and Forestry, in addition to the suggestion that was made by my honorable colleague, so that they also tell this House the specific actions that they are also taking to deal with the issue of land management, especially at the coastlands, so that this House will be fully informed about the actions. Thank you.
Is there any ministry known as Ministry
of Lands and Natural Resources? Okay. I beg your pardon. Thank you very much.
Ghana at 50. Honorable Emmanuel, Dr. Marfo's statement. Honorable.
Thank you. Right Honorable Speaker. Ghana, our beloved nation, will be 60 years in few days to come. And in preparing our hearts and minds towards the celebration, I find it prudent and timely to remind ourselves that our national development has not advanced at the pace that our contemporaries like South Korea, China, and Malaysia have gone. Today, while we enjoy a GDP per capita income of about $1,300, South Korea and Malaysia are enjoying about $25,000 and $11,000 respectively. Mr. Speaker, the poverty and development gap between us and our contemporaries is too wide to make us have any comfort of mind at age 60. Let me restate here that the development gap is a technology gap, and the empirical evidence in support of this is well-founded. And Mr. Speaker, this fact is so notorious that I do not need to belabor the point. So far, African governments' commitment to science and technology has been very scanty and inadequate, though let me be quick to state that I am mindful of the numerous challenges facing us that require equal attention. However, Mr. Speaker, the relevance of science, technology, and innovation to national development cannot be lost on any nation, as they have been the main driving force behind almost all successful nations. And this explains why the most economically advanced countries are those with strong scientific and technological capabilities, and this is why I feel very strongly and motivated to make this maiden statement. Mr. Speaker, I wish to call upon African governments in general, Ghana government in particular, to substantially increase budget allocation to science and technology, improve mathematics, science, and technology education, and promote innovation, as this, in my humble view, is the surest path for us to accelerate our growth and development and perhaps catch up with our contemporaries. Mr. Speaker, I make this statement taking cognizance of the general directive principles of state policy in our fourth Republican Constitution, and particularly Article 38, which enjoins us to pay attention to science and technology. I'm also mindful of our national development policy commitments. For example, the Ghana Shared Growth and Development Agenda, which aims at socio-economic transformation with emphasis on mathematics, science, technology, and innovation. Indeed, as a country, we have subscribed to other international commitments on the development of science and technology. Mr. Speaker, a number of reasons have accounted for why we as a country have not been able to maximize the benefit of science, technology, and innovation. And for my purpose today, I'd like to dwell on three main issues. These are lack of adequate funding of science and technology, weak science and mathematics education, and also weak institutional collaboration among universities and public and private research centers. Mr. Speaker, one major factor that has handicapped research and development activities for decades in this country has been access to finance, even though we have made numerous policy commitments. The African Union and the Economic Community of West African States in 1980 under the Lagos Plan of Action, the Cairo Declaration of the First Ministerial Conference on Science and Technology, and the Science and Technology and Innovation Strategy for Africa 2024 have all prescribed that we allocate at least 1% of GDP to research and development. Currently, science, technology, and innovation funding in Ghana is just about 0.35% of GDP. Mr. Speaker, with this mega funding, it is not surprising that we have not been able to fully employ science and technology to support and indeed accelerate our development compared to Korea, China, and Malaysia, for example. For instance, whereas Korea and Malaysia are spending between 2.8% and 4.2% of their GDP on R&D, Ghana is spending a mega 0.38%, about a tenth of what Korea's expenditure on R&D is. In order to address the shortfall, Mr. Speaker, the 2010 National Science, Technology, and Innovation Policy has proposed the allocation of 2% of the country's GDP towards investment in science and technology. The policy has further elicited the support and contribution of the private sector towards the establishment of the Science Research Technology Fund. Mr. Speaker, this government has made a manifesto pledge of increasing budgetary allocation to the science and technology sector to at least 1.5% of GDP over the next 4 years, and will strongly urge the government to pursue this and further develop a clear monitoring framework to assess the social, economic, and environmental impact to justify the budget allocation. In addition, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to urge the government, the private sector, and donors to contribute to enrich the Research Endowment Fund, which I understand has a total funding level of only 2.5 million Ghana cedis. Mr. Speaker, increasingly, it seems that interest in science education is dwindling contrary to expectation, given the pace at which scientific research and technological development is advancing globally. A study conducted in 2002 showed that enrollment in Bachelor of Arts and Management programs as a percentage of total enrollment in the universities has been about 65% and is increasing, while courses in medicine, engineering, and other sciences keep declining. In 2013, students on programs in the humanities constituted 64% against 36% in the sciences in Ghana. And in fact, students pursuing graduate programs in the sciences constituted 22% of total graduate student population. Mr. Speaker, it is important to reverse this trend if we can promote science, technology, and innovation to support national development. In this regard, the Ministry of Education, in collaboration with the Ministry of Environment, Science, Technology, and Innovation, should work out and implement a plan to achieve the government's plan of achieving a 60 to 40 student ratio for the sciences as compared to the humanities. Mr. Speaker, the time has come for the collaboration between the universities and research institutions such as the Council for Scientific and Industrial Research and others to be cemented. As we speak, Mr. Speaker, there are perhaps thousands of research reports, equipment and industrial process designs, and postgraduate theses and technologies scattered all around, locked up on the shelves of libraries and in the reports of scientists and consultants. The time to bring all these out in a more coordinated manner to synthesize the information and technologies in order to strengthen our knowledge base for a smooth takeoff into our desired new era of scientific innovation is now. Mr. Speaker, it will be very useful to the public to have a one-stop center where people can access available technologies developed. So, for example, how can the CSIR Technology Development and Transfer Center be strengthened to coordinate and promote the adoption of specific technologies is a key question that must occupy the thoughts of government. Mr. Speaker, all these will require an effective institutional coordination and governance, and this is why I will call on the government to expedite action on the establishment of a Presidential Advisory Council for Science and Technology. Mr. Speaker, government must keep faith with its commitment to make science and technology begin to play its central role. And I believe the appointment of a pragmatic scientists and technologists in the person of Professor Kwabena Frimpong-Boateng to lead this agenda as the Minister of Environment, Science, Technology, and Innovation is commendable. I further urge our colleagues in this August House who will be privileged to serve on the ECOWAS Parliament to be lead advocates for member countries to take practical steps towards their commitment under the Lagos Plan of Action, especially as collaboration for scientific research and technological development within the sub-region is one of the main focal areas of the ECOWAS Parliament. In conclusion, Mr. Speaker, as we have risen to the occasion, I trust that Ghana, at the age of 60 will once again lead the sub-region into a new era where scientific research, technology development, and innovation will play a central role in Africa's development efforts. In particular, development of technologies that support mitigation of climate change, food security, and institutional equipment and processes are key to our transformation agenda. I thank you, Right Honorable Speaker, for the opportunity to make this maiden statement.
Statement by Honorable Dr. Emmanuel Marfo, Honorable Member for Oforikrom, saying no to suicide on our university campuses.
Thank you, Right Honorable Speaker. Speaker, the incidence of suicide on our university campuses is becoming too rampant and worrying. Just about 3 weeks ago, we have witnessed a number of suicide cases on our university campuses. I'm sad to observe that just about 2 weeks or so, another 18-year-old first-year student of the Independence Hall of the Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology was found dead in her room. Speaker, as the MP for Oforikrom Constituency, where KNUST is located, I was shocked upon hearing the news and wish to express my deepest condolences to the family of the deceased and the university community at large. Speaker, I engaged the university authorities last 2 weekends on this issue, and as we speak, investigations into the alleged case of suicide is ongoing. And so at this moment, I will only want to dwell on some peripheral issues related to student security, health, and access to counseling, which all have implications for safety. Mr. Speaker, it's important because this is not the first time we are hearing of a student committing suicide on our campus, and I believe the time has come for us to say no more suicides on our campuses. First of all, Mr. Speaker, many of our students are accommodated outside the main campuses due to inadequate official residence facilities. Today, if you go to my constituency of Oforikrom, towns like Ayeduase and Bomso, for example, have become the main areas hosting almost all continuing students of KNUST. And I believe the situation may not be different in other universities. The question is, how safe are these private hostels? Speaker, I personally walked through the gates of some hostels this weekend without anybody questioning me. And so you can imagine if I were a criminal. I understand that the Tourist Board conducts some inspections and certify the safety of buildings meant for private hostels. Yet, my cursory checks of some hostels suggest to me that we have more to do in terms of security. In the case of KNUST, for example, the situation in some areas is so bad that it is the SRC that has taken steps to provide street lights in the neighborhood of some hostels in order to ensure the security of students from robbery, attacks, and rape. The Ministry of Education may need to conduct its own periodic checks to ensure that safety and security measures are always in place. Mr. Speaker, I also believe that the time has come for us to pay particular attention to the requirements of the health screening before academic work starts, to ensure that the new entrants are in a sound body and mind state. We seem to have realized this requirement, and as I understand, in the case of KNUST, for example, out of the 11,000 fresh students, only about 3,500 have so far completed their medical examination requirements. I believe there are very good reasons for instituting this measure, and it must be enforced, as it may help university authorities and indeed parents to take early measures to ensure that students are in the best of shape for the difficult academic work ahead. Lastly, Mr. Speaker, access to timely counseling in our schools is also equally important, especially these days that most of our children go to the university as teenagers. Life on university campus can be complex, and many of these young people need to have counseling at their doorsteps. Even though I understand that in addition to the main counseling centers, there are dedicated counselors at the colleges as well as trained peer counselors, yet owing to the large student populations, these are inadequate, and perhaps we need to bring some innovation to this by exploring the possibility of using ICT, for example, such as mobile app, that can make students have easy access to counselors even on their mobile phones. If the banks have succeeded in using this technology, I don't see why it is not possible for the universities to also adopt same. Speaker, the discussion on these measures should be encouraged among stakeholders to ensure that our young students have timely access to counseling and that they also live and learn in a safe environment. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the privilege.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member.
Honorable Member for Oforikrom.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I stand to speak in favor of the motion and to support the request by the ministry for the indicated allocation of the money stipulated in their report. In doing so, I would like to, first of all, commend the ministry for the good work that they were able to do in the year 2016. Speaker, if you look at the 2017 proposals that the ministry submitted to the committee, they outline a number of activities that, to a large extent, sit very well with the constitutional imperative of Article 36(9). And Speaker, if you look at the EPA is asking for funds to increase their regulation, and I think this is an important aspect of the activities that they have outlined, because recently we have all been reading about the extent of water pollution as a result of galamsey and other illegal activities that negatively affect the environment, and therefore asking for resources to increase their activities to regulate these illegal activities, I believe is in the right direction. Speaker, another interesting point is that this budget is seeking to address one of the challenges in the science technology sector, and that is the gap between science and policy, the lack of linkages between science and policy. A number of research have been conducted, a number of technologies have been developed within the CSI, within our universities. Sadly, most of these technologies have not been taken up, they have not been piloted, they have not been upscaled, and they have not been applied to actually give effect to the very reasons why they were developed. They do not affect the everyday life of the Ghanaian people because we fail to take up these technologies and apply them. And therefore, proposing to improve their linkage with the policy actors in 2017 is commendable, especially when you view it in the context of government's program to promote one district, one factory, and within the context of the industrialization drive that the government is seeking to achieve. And in commending them, I'd like to also urge the CSIR to focus their research activities on areas that are of priority to the country, areas that will directly link to food security, to climate change, and so on and so forth. And so, Mr. Speaker, the last point that I'd like to say in support of the motion is the observation that the increment of the budget allocation to R&D relative to the total revenue comparing 2016 and 2017 is commendable. And I think it's in line with government's goal of attempting to allocate between 1% and 2% of revenue to GDP. And that is also in line with the Lagos Plan of Action, and indeed the actions or the decisions that have been taken by the AU to commit more resources to the development of science and technology. And I think it gives a positive signal to our ECOWAS Parliament, which also has it as one of its focus to promote science and technology development within the sub-region. And so, Mr. Speaker, I'm very happy that the ministry has outlined very useful activities for 2017, for which they are asking for the indicated budget, and I stand to speak in favor of it. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Speaker, I would add my voice to commending the maker of the statement for drawing our attention to such an important subject. Speaker, I think that what the honorable member has presented has a firm grounding in our Republican Constitution. And if it pleases you, I'd like to refer you to Article 34(3). It states that the state shall promote just and reasonable access by all citizens to public facilities and services in accordance with law. And so I think the maker of the statement could not be wrong if he suggests that we need to look at mechanisms to ensure that ordinary persons in remote areas of our country have access to the scholarship facilities. And Speaker, even if in the immediate we cannot have the Secretariat decentralized, I think that the coordinator or whoever is in charge of the Scholarship Secretariat should make sure that in exercising their authority, they are mindful of the guidance from the Constitution that enjoins all officers who exercise discretionary power to do so in a way that is fair and candid, and in addition to do so in such a manner that is not arbitrary, capricious and biased, as spelled out in Article 297. I think that members of Parliament, de facto, we have also become development agents. That even though our core function is not to do development in our constituencies, we all know that every day people come to members of Parliament to seek for scholarship and to seek for assistance. And so in addition to exploring the option of using internet-based applications, as suggested by the previous honorable member, I think we can also use the members of Parliament, their offices in their constituencies, also as a collection point for students or people who need to have access to the scholarship secretariat. And finally, Mr. Speaker, I would like to state that the institutional arrangements need to be streamlined. The maker of the statement drew our attention to that, and the other honorable member even indicated that the GET Fund also offers some scholarships that are not known to many of the public. And I'm sure even some members of parliament here may not know that GET Fund also offers scholarship. And so we need to be able to collapse these parallel structures and ensure that there is only one point where the public can access scholarship facilities in this country, so that the scheme will be regulated in a more effective manner. With these few words, I'd like to commend the maker of the statement. Thank you, Speaker.
Thank you very much, Honorable. Honorable Member for Oforikrom.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I would also like to support the motion and to pray honorable members to also support the motion. Speaker, I'm referring to page 5 of your committee's report, and I'm particularly excited by the recommendation to make consultation with stakeholders mandatory. I think that making it mandatory gives material meaning to the constitutional provision, to Article 35, 6D. And with your permission, I would like to read. To make democracy a reality by decentralizing administrative and financial machinery of government to the regions and districts, and by affording all possible opportunities to the people to participate in decision-making at every level in national life and in government. So, Mr. Speaker, I'm dwelling on this point because whenever we have talked about consultation in practice, in most cases, consultation has been a mere symbolic gesture. In many of project documents and policy documents, when formulators have been called upon to consult stakeholders, they merely gather people and, if you like, inform them without meaningfully creating space for them to, if you like, influence the decisions that are taken. And this is particularly important because this bill is seeking to create a law to, if you like, bring development to a region that has a certain cultural context that has to be borne in mind, especially the powerful roles that chiefs and opinion leaders play. And in many of these consultation processes, you will find that when people want to be fast, they just gather chiefs or opinion leaders, tell them what they want to do, and they call that consultation. And that is just a mere symbolic gesture. I think in the spirit of the provision that I've read, if we really need substantive consultation, then we need to be able to develop further guidelines to make sure that we create a mechanism where the consultation process will be responsive and will be accountable. I believe when we are able to do this, we will achieve the bottom-up approach that we want to use to bring development to our people. And at the end of the day, the governance landscape will be good for us to achieve the purpose for which this bill is being passed. With these few words, I'd like to thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity. I rise to support the motion to approve uh, 347,344,233 Ghana cedis for the services of the Ministry of Lands and Natural Resources for the year 2018. In supporting the motion, I'd like to dwell on one important point captured in your committee's report on page 9, which deals with the issue of managing forest resources in Ghana. Mr. Speaker, I choose to dwell on this because we are all aware of the alarming rate at which Ghana is losing our natural forests, and our commitment to the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals, particularly the SDG 15, which enjoins countries that have subscribed to implement sustainable management, promote the implementation of sustainable management of all types of forests. Mr. Speaker, as a country, we also have made commitments both in our national forest and wildlife policy and also in our coordinated program for economic and social development to plant between 20,000 and 25,000 hectares of forest a year. With that commitment in mind, I find it interesting that the ministry has been bold to set a target of planting 30,000 hectares of forest in 2018, meaning that the ministry is actually going beyond even the targets that have been set in national policy documents. And in that respect, I believe that we ought to commend government for that bold decision to undertake a vigorous plantation program in the coming year, especially because, Mr. Speaker, over the years since 2002 to date, our annual plantation cover has been around 13,000. And therefore, to jump from 13,000 to 30,000 is indeed a bold decision that the government has taken. And I could agree with my ranking that this is indeed an ambitious project. Having said that, Mr. Speaker, for us to be able to encourage the ministry to commit resources to implementing this goal, we need to be able to bring in perspective the importance of Ghana committing ourselves to planting 30,000 hectares of forest in the year 2018. First of all, Mr. Speaker, we all know that Ghana is among the countries with the highest rate of deforestation. In fact, we are said to be losing some 65,000 hectares of our forest every year. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, until we are able to recover the forest resources that we are losing in the near future, as said in our coordinated program for economic and social development policy, if we continue to lose our forests at this rate, Ghana is likely to lose our natural forests by the year 2040. And therefore, it is important that we pay attention to forest plantation. And that is why we are all in support of government's commitment to undertake this important project. Mr. Speaker, undertaking this project will boost the sustainable levels of forests that can help us meet our domestic and export timber needs. And by able to plant 30,000 hectares, the estimate is that we will be able to move our forest plantation, timber supply from our forest plantation from 3.4 million to 6.65 million cubic meters. And Mr. Speaker, this alone will be able to supply 66% of our domestic and overland timber needs from plantations alone. The other reason why it is important that we commit ourselves to implementing this project is that we will be able to raise the net present value of plantation timber from the current $130 million to $365 million. So even though the cost of executing this project may seem to be very high, Mr. Speaker, if you look at the returns that this country will gain now and in the near future, we must be able to commit ourselves to implementing this project. And as captured, I'm winding up, Mr. Speaker, thank you. Mr. Speaker, finally, let me say that we have not even talked about the environmental and the ecosystem services that such a plantation cover will provide for this country. And therefore, while supporting the motion, I would like to urge the ministry to ensure that they are also committed and that all available opportunities to be able to raise additional funding to support such a project should be undertaken so that at the end of the day, Ghana will come to the level of sustainable production of forest. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, for your indulgence. Delivery system. And so, commending her, I'd like to also urge honorable members to also commit some of our funds to help educate the public, especially those in our schools, of the need to appreciate that mental health is a challenge in this country and that it is important that we seek care and also to more or less provide some support. Mr. Speaker, I am supporting parents with children who are suffering from autism, and I will urge my colleagues to go to the extent of fishing out or looking for parents who might have children suffering from such disabilities so that we can extend some form of assistance to them. Indeed, these conditions are very expensive to cure. For example, the average child who is receiving therapy in any center treating autism pay not less than 3,000 Ghana cedis. And if you look at the levels of salaries that people take in this country, you may appreciate that most Ghanaians will not be able to afford such therapies. And that is why these children are mostly left uncared for. And so, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. Thank you very much.
Honourable Member for Oforikrom.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to commend the maker of the statement and associate myself with the concerns that he has raised. I'm particularly interested in the loss of cocoa due to pests and diseases and he gives the statistics as that between 30 to 40% of cocoa production is lost because of pests and diseases. Mr. Speaker, if you look at the production levels in 2017, it suggests that we are losing some 245,000 tons of cocoa that we produce due to pests and diseases. And if you put that on top of the 2017 production, for example, potentially we should have been producing some 985,000 tons of cocoa, which is approximately 1 million tons of cocoa. Mr. Speaker, this loss is unfortunate, and it should draw our attention to looking seriously into the entomology of cocoa research. And it fits into our commitment to commit substantial resources to science and technology development in this country. Mr. Speaker, we are committed as a country to use at least 1% of our GDP to support science and technology development in this country. So far, we have been doing something around 0.35%. And so we need to pay more attention to science and technology, particularly in this context, paying attention to the study of diseases and pests in the cocoa sector. Just on top of that, perhaps we should also be looking at the problem of science policy linkage in this country. There's a huge gap between science and policy. If you go to our universities and our research centers, a lot of work has been done on several subjects. Technologies have been developed, and all these are locked up in libraries, just gathering dust. I think it's about time we took this issue more seriously and work towards bringing all the knowledge that we have generated in our research institutes. And fortunately, as a country, we have the Cocoa Research Institute of Ghana. And I believe when you go to their library, you may find that a lot of work has been done on cocoa pests and diseases. But who is taking this output up in terms of translating them into policy and probably practice? And so this statement should remind us and perhaps urge us, particularly our committee responsible for cocoa affairs, to try to work hard and make sure that the ministry and maybe the cocoa research attempt to put in interventions that will help us reduce the loss of cocoa from the current average of 35% to probably something more appreciable. With this few statements, I would like to thank the maker of the statement, Mr. Speaker, and also associate myself with his concerns. Thank you very much.
Honorable Member for Esutifi.